Most people hate these 5th generation Quattroportes. In fact, you can now get them in the US or here in Europe for fewer than 15,000 euros. These cars are the stereotypical lemon. It's the kind of car that you buy because you actually like it, but then it's very hard to find a proper buyer. But what most people don't know is that these 2009 onwards Quattroportes are actually almost completely different from those earlier models. These are much more reliable, and so in this video I want to talk about two things. First, why most people actually hate these cars, and second, why they are actually worth it and are, in my opinion, one of the most undervalued cars in the market right now. So first of all, what am I driving here? This is a Maserati Quattroporte S with a 4.7-liter V8 that sends out 431 horsepower to the rear wheels through an automatic 6-speed gearbox. This is a luxury sedan. It rivals cars like the Audi A8, the BMW 7 Series, the Jaguar XJ, and especially the Porsche Panamera. So follow me for a second and let's dive a little bit into the history of this car, because knowing where it comes from is crucial to understand why it is what it is. The Maserati Quattroporte, which is literally named after the fact that it's got 4 doors, was launched in the 60s and throughout its first 4 generations was a relatively low production figure car. It didn't really help that Maserati changed owners 1,000 times during this period. But everything changed with the 5th generation Quattroporte. Because Ferrari and Maserati were still the same brand, they were the same company, they decided to work together on this car. In some ways, the Maserati Quattroporte was supposed to be the Ferrari sedan that the prancing horse brand would never make. And in Maserati, they took the idea of making a Ferrari sedan very seriously. In fact, this car has the Ferrari F136 engine, which is, with some minor changes, the same engine that the Ferrari F430 had and later the Ferrari California. So those early Quattroportes had the F136 engine that I was just talking about, with 4.2 liters of displacement, a dry sump, and the DuoSelect automated manual gearbox, which is essentially the same gearbox that in Ferrari was called the F1 gearbox, in some Maseratis Cambio Corsa, and in Alfa Romeo the Celespeed. I know I may be oversimplifying some things, but essentially this car is a Ferrari F430 in a luxury car chassis. So this sounds like the perfect car, right? Well, Maserati made a huge mistake when thinking about how these cars would be used. Because the average Ferrari owner drives at most 3,000 kilometers a year, whereas these big luxury land yacht owners actually drive far more. These cars actually get used to travel around, and people use them as their daily drivers. Those features that seem so cool in a Ferrari F430 are actually drawbacks here in the Maserati Quattroporte. For instance, the Ferrari engine that this Maserati has is actually a very reliable engine, but it requires you to keep up with a very strict maintenance schedule. If you don't do that, the engine will get destroyed. The dry sump system leaves no margin for error. If you lose any oil, if you have any leaks, you will eventually grenade the engine. But the biggest issue that this early Quattroportes had was the DuoSelect gearbox. The DuoSelect gearbox goes through clutches like you go through toilet paper after a night out in Chipotle. Owners were having to replace their clutch maybe once or twice a year, whereas a Ferrari owner does it once every 9 or 10 years. These clutches cost over 4,000 euros, so it can get very expensive very fast. These issues became worse as the car depreciated, because the people who started buying them were not the people who were wealthy enough to afford them actually. And so this car went on that death spiral of depreciating value. So Maserati did not consider that a Ferrari F430 and a Maserati Quattroporte would be used so differently. It didn't take long for people to start avoiding this 5th generation Quattroportes because of their maintenance costs. And so new car sales started dropping. Maserati decided to solve this issue first in 2007 by introducing this new ZF 6-speed automatic gearbox with a torque converter. It's a very traditional and robust automatic gearbox, and it started replacing the DuoSelect. Then, with the restyling, it introduced the engine that this car has, the 4.7-liter 431 horsepower engine. This engine has a wet sump, so there's a bit more leeway when it comes to maintenance, and it's not so bad if you get a small oil leak. As a fun fact, it's almost essentially the same engine as the Alfa Romeo 8C. But the damage was already done, and Maserati sales never recovered, not even with the 6th generation Quattroporte. People who love Quattroportes and who actively seek them generally look for these ZF transmission Quattroportes who are much more reliable. And people who don't know anything about Maserati or Quattroportes just buy them because they're cheap luxury cars. But there are people in the middle who try to avoid them, thinking that every Maserati is as unreliable as those with the DuoSelect transmission, when these are actually fairly reliable cars. If you reached this point in the video and you're enjoying it as much as I enjoyed making it, then would you mind subscribing? This is a new channel for me, and growing is super important so that YouTube keeps on recommending me. Thank you. Anyway, let's take it for a drive, because I know that's what you want me to do. I love how this car sounds. Going over the spec sheet, this car has the 4.7 liter V8 that puts out 431 horsepower, sends them to the rear wheels. The best of this car is the Ferrari sound. This car is actually much louder when you're outside the car than when you're inside the car. And in fact, this is what it sounds like. The build quality is really amazing, and Maserati really likes to use very high quality materials in its cars. This really shows when you're driving the Quattroporte. It's so silent and you almost waft along. But then you downshift. How this car sounds is absolutely perfect. I could be just going from 80 kilometers an hour to 120, back to 80 again all day. It's not fuel efficient, but it's what I would do if I owned this car, because the sound is the #1 reason why you would actually get one. Since I'm pulling up to the gas station, one thing I should mention is the fuel consumption of this car. I could not get it under 17 or 18 liters every 100 kilometers when it came to actually using it in this review, and I assume that if you're city driving, you won't be able to get it under 20. But that's a fair price to pay for driving an actual Ferrari engine. Something very interesting happened when I was driving this car. I realized it wasn't going over 4,500 RPM, and I thought the car was broken. It had gone into limp mode. And then I realized that I had accidentally put it into ice mode that does not let you go over 4,500 RPM. And that speaks volumes of how we actually think of this car as unreliable, and the instant that something is not working as we think it should, we think, oh, this has broken down. If it were a Toyota, we would say, oh, perhaps I just pressed the wrong button. These Quattroportes are actually reliable, and it's very hard to forget about that. This car is almost flawless. Let's talk a little bit about how well equipped this car is. The key is a standard Fiat key with the logo of Maserati in the back. This interior is full late 2000s glory. The steering wheel and the seat moves when you close the door, and back when you shut the car off and open the door, they move right back so that you can get into and out of the car more comfortably. The wing mirrors are exactly those in an Alfa Romeo 159. It's actually an exchangeable piece. And I know that because I own an Alfa Romeo 159, and when I first sat in the car, I was like, I've seen this view before, and I don't own a Maserati. What I love about the Maserati's interior is that everything has a button. Even things that could have been solved with just one button get 2 buttons. So lock and lock. Move the rear curtain down or curtain up, or increase or decrease the lighting of the dash. Those things could have been just one button, but it's 2, and I love it. I love cars that are filled with buttons. I'm very old-fashioned when it comes to that. This must be the most luxurious arm holder, what is this called in English, that I've ever seen. First of all, it's a leather strap, a fine leather strap. And second, it clips there with a magnet, and you can grab it back and just hold it like this while your chauffeur drives at 200 miles an hour, or actually 185. Even the glove box deserves its own button. Everything gets their own button here, and I think that's part of what makes this interior so great. All in all, I don't think this car deserves the bad reputation that it has. In fact, it is the most affordable way to have a Ferrari, or at least a car that sounds just like a Ferrari. And if you want a weekend car where you can also take your friends along, I think it's a great option. In fact, if you're going to drive very few kilometers a year with it, you might even consider a car with the DuoSelect and a very good maintenance record. However, if you think you're going to be using it a bit more frequently, then these later cars with the ZF transmission and the upgraded engine are the way to go. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, don't forget to like it, comment and subscribe for more content on this channel. Until next time!